We are now.
Great, thank you. My name's Commissioner Fowler, and I'm here to begin the Medication and Safety Committee meeting. I will first do a roll call. Can everyone announce who is present, please? Oh, I guess I should announce. Director Nguyen, are you present?
I am present for the record.
I see you. Commissioner Stein?
Present.
Are those the only people I need to put on the? Okay, perfect.
Actually, we have Mike here. You should probably reach out to Mike Twigg since he is a steward and represents safety as well.
And I am here.
Mike, but good to see you. All right. Then it looks like to start, we need to approve the meeting agenda. I looked over it earlier. I didn't see any issues. Any issues, or are we ready to go forward with this agenda? I'm
Yes.
seeing everyone nod their head yes, so let's move forward then. Our new business is first to discuss possible changes to medication and safety rules for 2026. I don't know if there were specific rules that you attached, Director Nguyen, or not.
Commissioner Fowler, thank you. I did not attach any specific ones, but any changes that we make, we should probably consider doing early in the season, as the season is ending, so we can notice as much as possible. The only things that I know that were of interest are listed below this, but I do think it's important that whatever we do for next summer, we consider doing as soon as possible, so we can get the word out. That's it. That's all that was
I
about.
think that makes.
Yeah, how are we set on the butte regulation? Is that already in the rulemaking?
Thank you for asking. They're actually conducting a hearing now. I think you heard some background noise. I'm actually listening in just in case they need me for that. They are doing a hearing on that, and that will become final in November. The commission, provided the commission makes a rule permanent and votes it in. But it should come in without a problem for that. So we'll start noting those new amounts. And again, that was the intention initially, but we decided to let the actual level stay as they were to give everyone a chance to get used to it. And I have to say, the majority of people were very good about it. There was a couple people that took advantage of it, but not very many.
The only other thing I would add to the list I see here is if we want to revisit the Coggins thing at all that we were talking about last time.
I'm sorry, I meant to actually bring that up and add that, so thank you. So I guess we need to go back to approving the agenda and add on it discussion on Coggins.
Perfect. We'll add that in at number 9.
Okay, great.
So moving on to the first potential change, we've got track warning systems, and perhaps you can tell us more about that.
I think that was brought up by Dr. Stein. Dr. Stein, you have more experience with that. I know what they are, and I know that I was really interested in the fact that you knew ways to do that were much cheaper than some of the ways I was thinking about.
Well, when we have an accident, and especially since all our tracks are half-mile tracks, that is very dangerous to have horses out there when we have a loose horse possibly going the wrong direction, or a rider who might be down and we need to have, the ambulance out there. So a very simple way of doing it is some sort of air horn. The standard procedure would be to have lights, flashing lights at the 8th poles or quarter poles, and some sort of siren that would sound, that would be controlled by the stewards because they have an overall view of the track. But until we can get something permanent like that, even just being able to sound an air horn to alert the riders that the race is called off. It doesn't happen very often, but being at Tillamook and seeing that horse jump the rail twice, first jump both the inner rail to get to the infield and then the inner rail to get to the main track, and having it going the wrong direction. I think those are issues that, I mean, it's just frightening to see that. And I've seen it happen where there was no warning system and races continued with riders down on the track and horses going all over the place. And, you know, if you have, we've been lucky that I think there's only been, at least from what I could see, only one loose horse at a time. But if you get two loose horses at a time, it is just a disaster. If you can't get the riders to pull their horses up and you know, have a no contest.
So
I think that makes sense. What is our system? Do we have a system now? No.
we don't have any system at all right now. And I know that was one of the things that they needed to do in Grants Pass if they were to become HISA.
Okay.
At that time, they were looking at a very expensive system, but they had the money to do it back then. I think it would be a really good one to open up to public comment in the full commission meeting to get comments from the participants. But I do think it would be a good rule for us to put in place. They may ask for money to do it. We don't have the money to do it, but it doesn't sound like it would cost that much, according to Dr. Stein. Maybe it's something that we plan effective, you know, further out to give people a chance to prepare for it. I also like to hear from Mike Twiggs.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm reading your mind, Mike.
Yeah. That's all fine and good, you know, with the stewards conducting it during races. But the first thing then, or the next thing that comes to mind is schooling horses in the morning when you don't have stewards in the stand. So, you know, that whatever system came about, I would think you'd want to have one switch in the steward stand for like during the races, but then have another one up at the back gap, you know, that could be activated by, you know, outriders or whoever. You know, I think that's a major consideration.
I think that's a great idea. So perhaps what we do at this point, because it sounds like we all agree that further discussion is warranted, we can put this on the agenda for next month's commission meeting and have a discussion with the full commission and the industry participants.
Or you could even just put it in your report today.
Oh, okay.
And as part of that report, you could open up to public comment. So it's up to you.
I see. Okay. Okay.
And
Well,
then
we can
if
do
they
that.
decide that they do want to do that, and the commission directs me so, I would put together language that would come in the November meeting.
Perfect. Well, then I will just include it in my report. And just out of curiosity, do you know, Director Nguyen, what the HISA rules dictate, or if they dictate something?
I know that they require a warning system. I can't tell you anything else about that. I can certainly find out and get you the information.
I'm just thinking back to when we were watching races at Churchill Downs. I'm hearing an echo. I don't recall there being any sounds being alarmed when, you know, for perhaps when that horse broke down or when riders fell off or anything like that during a race. I don't ever remember hearing anything. So
Right.
I was just curious.
Mike can address that, but I believe a lot of them are more like warning lights that you might not see from the camera angle. Mike, can you address that?
Yeah, the thing with lights, unless you have a bunch of them, you know, around the circumference, if you will. If they're not facing the light and they don't see it, then it doesn't do any good. That's why I think audible warnings are the utmost important.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Okay, anything else at this point that we should address on the track warning systems? Hearing nothing, let's talk about the Tillamook paddock.
Back to Dr. Stein, or Commissioner Stein, sorry.
That's okay. It's a very crowded paddock. Somehow I think we need to get together with the fair and figure out some manner to rearrange that paddock to give a little more room. I know Connie and I had looked at it and talked about like shifting the jockeys' quarters out to where the fence is that separates from like where they show the cattle and stuff. But just to allow some more room, because there's a couple of spots in there that really get tight. It's not like Grants Pass where they can walk horses around comfortably. That if a horse got, jumped out of its paddock stall, at Tillamook, it looks like that you'd get horses colliding just if one jumped out of their paddock stall. So I think if there's a way that we can reconfigure that with the fair's help, I think that would make for a safer paddock.
And I had suggested that early on. When they reconfigured the paddock, it's been a few years ago now. Because where that turn, where you break off into that first turn, it gives you a little bit more room there. Now you got the tower there that's pretty much got to stay.
Yeah.
I mean, because we're looking down the stretch from there. But it still affords a little bit more room. But they didn't want to do it because people wanted to watch the horses in the ring, like from that whiskey bar or whatever that is, the beer garden, right across the fence. They can't really go out towards where they show the cattle out in that road because, that's a thoroughfare, right? So I thought that was about the only option, but they didn't like the idea because they would have to look over the jocks room to watch the horses, whether they're in the grandstand, the bleachers, the beer garden, wherever. And, so I didn't like the fact that they went the direction they did, but they did. So
Maybe,
Yeah.
I don't know if they're gonna be on the call this afternoon. If they are, obviously you're gonna bring up in your report. If they're not, and they don't want to discuss it, you had mentioned, Dr. Stein, Commissioner Stein, that you wanted to participate in the first fair meet call. I think that would be a great time to talk about all the paddocks with them, and that's a more informal, it's actually their call, it's not a commission call. So it's not open to the public, but that would give you a chance to have all the fair meets there.
Yeah, and I would also say that the next item, which we had, the test barn requirements, I think that would be included in there too, because all the fairs have to be involved in that if we're gonna kind of follow the directions of the security of test barns. And you might as well, if we're going to deal with one issue, we certainly need to deal with the other.
Okay, well, that brings us to the test barn requirements. Commissioner Stein, you want to tell us? your
Yeah, well,
thoughts
I
on
mean,
that?
yeah, just the idea, we have the, I guess the handbook that's, been gone over, that our vets and technicians have talked about and created the manual and, let me get to the page. Well, for instance, like general considerations, when it says the test barn enclosure is a restricted area, I haven't seen, except at Grants Pass, that our test barns are an actual enclosure. And even at Grants Pass occasion, from what I understand, when they get a lot of horses to be tested, that sometimes they're walking outside the fenced area. Tillamook has no enclosure whatsoever. It's just basically a designated barn with no enclosure. And then, of course, when it says the facility should be secured at all times, if you don't have an actual enclosure, you can't be secure. I mean, those are basically, what we have to deal with, because, I mean, this may sound a little crazy, but fortunately, we don't race for a whole lot of money where someone who gets fined or suspended goes to and gets lawyers and says, hey, it's not a secure area. And here we have it in black and white saying that test barns should be in a secure area, so it's just something that I know there's limited stable space, limited stall space at all the tracks. I know it's a problem, but I think we just have to deal with it so that we don't have any issues, because I can certainly see issues down the road where this is questioned, whether it's a secure facility, secure enclosure. So I just think we have to deal with that.
Yeah, and Grants Pass has made some efforts to increase the size of theirs, which I really appreciate. And I've been talking to Twyla, who's in charge, and she even has a plan to make it even bigger for next year. So Grants Pass is actually will be in pretty good shape. I mean, they're not luxurious, having running water or anything, but overall, they'll be in pretty good shape. For the tracks you haven't seen, they've been using an arena for the test barn in Primeville. There has been some concerns because last year they put someone's personal walker in there. Then people were in and out with the walker. So that kept us from having it really be secure as well. There are a couple other things that I would really like to see. In one of the problems that we have in Primeville is they don't have Dutch doors.
Yeah.
So there's some safety issues for the staff without having those there, without having one that can open. So that's something that I'm very concerned about. One of the problems that the fairs are going to have is, like us, they're running on very tight budgets. So I'm not sure how fast any of these things can be done, but I do think they need to be recognized and we need to work on them.
So is that something that we can bring up? I'll mention it in my report, and then we decide if we want to discuss further at the commission meeting.
It's up to you guys. Do maybe we get in the fair meet when we know we have everybody there.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Okay. Shockwave discussion. I'm gonna guess that Commissioner Stein suggested this topic as well. No.
This one is mine. I had
Okay.
this, I had this
guess-
with a whole bunch of other things several months ago. And because they were all lumped together, it kind of, the whole pot got thrown out. And I did hear that there was interest in putting together a rule for shockwave. I think the initial one I'd proposed was 14 days. I don't have a preference on it, but I do think it's something we should address. And I would love to hear from not only the committee, but on this one, I'd like to hear from, I know we have a couple other doctors that are on the call, veterinarians, any opinions that they have on it as well. I'd like to also introduce Dr. Kinsley, which will officially be Commissioner Kinsley as of our next meeting, who's here as a participant until we elect him to a committee. So Dr. Stein first, I guess, and then anyone else if we want, if you're okay opening it to the public on this one.
Absolutely.
For me, 7 days, 14 days, I'm not quite sure. I I haven't used it. I'm kind of a dinosaur, so I'd rather open it up to a younger veterinarian.
Fair enough. Dr. Kinsley, it's nice to meet you. I'm Commissioner Fowler.
Hi.
Do you have any opinions on this?
Yeah, Shockwave can provide analgesia for 3 to 5 days, so it's going to have to be at least 7 days. Oftentimes we're doing treatments 2 weeks apart, so 14 days would probably be fine because the treatments are often 2 weeks apart.
Great. And there may be other vets in the commission meeting that want to address this as well. I think it's a good idea to go ahead and draft a rule on that. But I know this isn't a place where we take a vote on that, correct?
Correct, just a
Okay.
recommendation. Yeah.
Okay, so we can make that recommendation. Moving on to number 7, no Lasix for 2-year-olds or stake races. I know this is something that both Director Wynn and I noticed was discussed at the Steward School and thought that that was a good idea. I think it's remind me, all quarter horses and no 2-year-old thoroughbreds. Was that it? I can't
No,
remember.
you're thinking of clenbuterol, that's core horses.
Oh, okay.
The no Lasix right now, I don't believe that we have any rules that limit Lasix in 2-year-olds or in stake races. So I think the idea from the school was that, well, this seems to be something that's done in most places. I will say that you might want to ask for public comment on this because I do know that you'll get some later on anyway, but we're almost at the point to do public comment anyway. I do know that Randy Bodine had some concerns about it, which were interesting. You know, I mean, you consider them valid, I guess, but I'd like him to discuss those. Again, you can wait till public comment. We're not going to make any votes or decisions here anyway.
Sure. Well, why don't we just go ahead and have you address it now, Randy, since we're on the topic.
Okay, so as it regards the 2-year-olds, I've had some discussion with some of the horsemen, specifically some that do occasionally have the younger horses come up, and I'm not sure that that's a critical decision if you guys are really want to do it. We don't, as this year we barely had enough 2-year-olds to even have a race and stuff. So, but when it comes to the stakes races, you're really getting into an area that I think is going to make waves in areas where you really don't want them.
Okay.
The stakes races in Oregon are not the same as when you're talking about any of the tracks across the country that are larger tracks. I guess where I'm getting to is many of our horses that might run in a stakes race at the fairs are older horses to start with. So that's a concern because they've probably been on Lasix for most of their life during their racing career. And to just suddenly say, okay, you're off of Lasix now. And the other thing is that our horses kind of come in and out of the stakes. We have so few stakes races anyway. And the stake races, if you've got a horse that's good enough to run a stakes race at a county fair, doesn't necessarily mean that's a stakes horse at the fall meet when we get some of the Washington horses and California horses coming in and stuff. If you were looking at the results, you'd see that, sometimes those horses come in and dominate those races. So when you got horses that are maybe moving in and out of allowance company or even claiming horses, and then will on occasion jump into stakes company, again, you're asking the horse to go in and out of Lasix rather than just saying, and with the other consideration that comes to mind is that the way the rules I currently understand them, I asked Mike about this morning. And Mike actually asked Dr. Alice, just to be fair. I know that's where it all came from. But at the current time, if a horse bleeds and noticeable they see it on the track, then that horse can't race again for 14 days for the first offense, and then the length of time goes up on a subsequent offense until finally, once you get to a certain point, the horse is banned from racing any further. But so the adverse effect there is if you've got one of these horses that's been on Lasix for its entire career and the stakes race comes up, one of two things happens. The horse comes off the Lasix, bleeds, and misses the whole rest of the meet, or maybe even the next meet. Like if it happened at the last weekend at Grants Pass, the horse is going to miss Prineville entirely because he'll be on that mandatory wait period. But in the case, the other side of the coin is just as true in that if the horse has been a Lasix horse all of its career, quite possibly the trainer is going to say, it's not worth the risk to me to enter that one stakes race and take a chance of the horse bleeding. So therefore, we don't even get enough horses to make the race go. So there's a lot of parts to it that are, and again, it's a lot different when you're talking about stakes races. At the bigger tracks, whether it's Santa Anita or whether it's back east, those horses, a lot of them are stakes horses from the day they start. They cost a lot of money to start with. They're made to be stakes level horses. And so for them, you say, okay, look, you don't get Lasix from day one, the way the rules are at some of the tracks now. That's fine because they've never had it and they're never going to have it. Now, if a horse goes in there, it's a stakes horse and does bleed, then a lot of times they'll wind up getting dropped down to allowance company just for that reason alone, because they can't hack the rule as it stands with the stakes level horses. So, always a consideration, but I wanted to bring those things up because our horses are older and they're they run a certain way their whole life, and so I guess I have concerns if we go that route, that'll be detrimental coming from a couple different directions. So anyway, thank you for your time.
I appreciate the input on that. And Director Wynn, go ahead.
I just wanted to comment that it's a specific concern for the thoroughbreds. The quarter horses, we have a lot of younger quarter horses, but it really is. Randy explained it to me, and I was looking at the programs every day, and the quarter horses tend to be older horses.
Mhm.
So
The thoroughbreds.
Thoroughbreds, sorry.
Right.
Say what
Yeah,
I think.
the 2-year-old thing. If you extend the no Lasix to 2-year-olds, now you're in the quarter horse world really big, because their whole world is 2-year-olds. So, I was only speaking for my concern for thoroughbreds on that.
Yeah, this is Dave Nelson. I think you ought to take a look at the California rule. I think that half-strength Lasix are permitted, and then there is no restriction on Lasix 3-year-olds once the horse graduates that level. We have probably the closest stakes races at Grants Pass with larger purses, and also we have occasional AQHA challenge at Grants Pass that would, when the calendars fall right, that those horses would go on down to Albuquerque or wherever, and they would be eligible for older stakes events, and all of those would be considered stakes to be eligible for use Lasix, competing against horses from across the country that have a collage of Lasix rules. So I would suggest that we go very cautious as far as quarter horse rules on Lasix. I know that there is controversy over whether it's bad or upside down, and I think we have to have a fair understanding of where the preponderance of that is. So that's, it's a complicated thing.
Thank you. So I have a question. This is going to sound like a dumb question, because when I thought about this issue in Stewart School, it made sense to me, but now I'm trying to remember back. I know that Lasix has a purpose for bleeders, but is it in some way somewhat performance enhancing? Because my understanding from Stewart School is that yes, it was. Okay.
It,
Um,
if I may, Lasix is one of those topics when you deal with horsemen or you deal with researchers, etc., is actually very controversial because there is nothing, Lasix does not prevent bleeding. The evidence indicates that it may reduce the severity of the bleeding, and it's something that horsemen feel that if the one guy uses it, I should be able to use
Yeah.
it. I mean, it's kind of like the
Yeah.
Butte thing that we've talked about too. So that's one aspect. The other is that if we go back to some of the discussion about milkshaking, and we talk about Lasix horses and the levels used with milkshaking, they allow it's like 1.7 rounded up to 2, the number for Lasix horses, taking that into consideration because it is in some ways an alkalinizing agent
Yeah,
to
yeah.
some degree. And so then the discussion is that what's a performance enhancer, or is it the fact that they're maybe not bleeding as bad? So,
And
so it's a tough discussion because horsemen don't want to do without it because they feel historically their horses have raced okay on it.
Yeah.
But when you don't race on it, that, well, going back when Randy was talking about, the better horses, talking about Santa Anita or back east, there's an actual experiment going on every single day there. And that is 2-year-olds, when they become 3, automatically these trainers put the horse on Lasix. So you don't really know. It's from 2 to 3 horses make improvements anyway, even if you don't give them Lasix, though, just because they're bigger and stronger, etc. Then you have the experiment of the stake races. You take a horse who's raced in allowance company on Lasix. Now he races in stakes company off of Lasix. If he races bad, it's because he's not on Lasix? No, it's because he's now in stakes company. So if you base it only, for instance, on speed ratings or something along those lines, you may come up with a different answer than actual performance in terms of where they finish in a race, etc. It's a very controversial subject. And I do think we also need to take into account that there are forces out there that really oppose medication in horses, in race horses. And giving Lasix to a 2-year-old is really kind of that's an area that I personally, I find not very defensible. So yeah, I get exactly what Randy's talking about. We're not talking about, the greatest horses in the world. But I would also point to the fact that an entire continent does not allow the use of Lasix in horses, or several continents, I should say, don't
Well,
allow
but
the
they
use
don't
of
they don't
Lasix.
race on it, but they train on it. So that's not entirely a true statement either. I
Well,
mean,
whether you train
you
on it
can't
or
race on Lasix,
yeah,
but they do use it. No, I'm just saying. So, but no.
Well, and the
No,
other
I mean,
thing
these are
is,
just things for consideration. I mean,
Yeah.
I've actually been in meetings where I've seen veterinarians almost come to blows over
exactly.
arguing therapeutic versus in performance enhancing. And
Yeah.
Dr. Stein is right. I mean, this thing it's always been, right at the front when the controversy hit. So
sure. Well, it also seems like it's not necessarily that owners are waiting until they discover that a horse is a bleeder to put them on Lasix. They're preventatively doing it, and because everybody else is doing it, and then you've got all the racehorses running on Lasix, and like maybe there's an argument that we shouldn't be continuing to race horses that are bleeding anyway. But that's way more controversial than we need to go. And I know that Director Wynn wants to say something.
I always want to say something. I'd love to hear from any of the other doctors on here. I know we have at least 2 other doctors, maybe more. I can tell you, I'm not going to mention the doctor's name, but there is a pretty well-respected doctor in Oregon who has told me several times, Lasix really doesn't belong at the racetrack, but I'll be darned if I'm going to race horses and not have them on Lasix just because of the weight difference. So, because there is a significant weight difference. I've been told, and Dr. Stein, maybe you can confirm this, that a horse can lose up to 25, 30 pounds once they've been given Lasix.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. There's also, in the discussion, there's also the discussion that horses that are on Lasix don't recover as quickly as horses that are off of Lasix because of that water weight loss. So, I mean, I have personal experience with my horses. I took anything I got that was on Lasix, I took off. I never raced horses on Lasix unless they absolutely positively were bleeders, and usually I retired them. So there's a whole, I never saw Lasix. I can tell you the number of times the driver would come back and tell me and say, "Oh yeah, you should put him on Lasix. I think he's bleeding," and it made no difference. So I mean, that's just my experience.
Any other veterinarians want to chime in?
Come on,
No.
Dr. Kinsley.
No, he says, no, that's fine. I think maybe this could be a topic for further discussion, but not necessarily that it needs to go to the commission, because I think that a lot of fireworks will immediately start that are unnecessary at this point. That's my thought. Looks like you agree with me,
You're
Commissioner
right.
Stein. Okay. All right, perfect. Let's move on then to chain covers. And this was something that I suggested just because I hate the look to the public of chains over gums on a horse everywhere. And you see that there are covers. Some people use leather covers. Some people just put vet wrap. And people in the business may tell me that I'm crazy and this is not something we should be thinking about at all, and I'll accept that. But I just think for visual, it's just not a good look for the sport, and it's a really easy fix. I mean, vet wrap costs like 50 cents, and just put that over, and it doesn't look like there's a chain on a horse's gums. So that's my 2 cents. Anybody want to tell me I'm crazy? Go ahead. I'm inviting it.
You're not crazy. It's a bad look. And too many handlers don't actually know what's really happening. And it becomes abusive. The same way with a chain over the nose. You'll see grooms smack the horse, jerk on the lead chain and smack that chain right against their nose. That's a bad look. Chain underneath, that's a bad look.
Sure.
I'm not sure we can educate every single groom and trainer out there to what really is going on with the chain, and I would just refer to acupuncture and such. But
Yeah.
we do want the horses under control, and I know that's going to be the argument, that they can better control their horse if they have the chain. But I think, latex tubing or something similar to that, like you say, vet wrap over that chain should do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, I would in no way advocate to take the chain away. I mean, I can speak from personal experience that I, I have put a chain over my horse's nose and up the side of his halter when he decides he wants to be naughty with the farrier. And the second that chain goes on, I never have to use it. Never once do I have to use it. Just the fact that it's there. He's like, okay, yes, ma'am. Okay. And so, I think you're walking 2-year-old thoroughbreds. I would never say to our horsemen that no chains are needed. But it's just something that to cover it up would be nice. I don't know. Anybody?
Yeah, my comment, and I'm good with all that. I agree with everything you're saying, but back to the education of the horsemen, that's always been a dilemma.
Yeah.
Because one thing that really perturbs me is those chains that you put on, whether over the nose, over the lip, the gums, whatever, when they get fastened down so tight that the horse can never get relief from it.
Yeah.
You follow what I'm saying? And they
Yeah.
put them on a hot walker that way, and there's just never any relief, and it's not like they've got a little extra bit of a chain there that's, if you need to, when you're
Yeah.
schooling. But yeah, the education thing with the horsemen, that's going to be our biggest function, I think.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a good point too. It makes me crazy to see a horse on a hot walker with a chain. That to me is just really dangerous. But
Yeah.
that's for a different day. Coggins. My understanding is that we went to 6 months. The other states around us are at a year. We went to 6 months at a point where there was a lot of something was going on in California with horses getting sick. So let's hear from whoever wants to chime in on this.
I'm gonna start.
Please.
So we went to 6 months, and I think we did a really good job with notifying people, and we didn't really have any terrible problems. There was some inconvenience, and people were upset at the first couple meets. But in the fall meet, we really had problems with this, and it's because a lot of horses were coming in for big races from out of state, and it's in the book, but still.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of problems with it. And I think California at one point had even gone to 6 months, and that was one of my justifications for it. They're back to a year or two. I did have a chance to talk to the epidemiologist for the state who happened to be working for us last weekend. And his opinion was, just to share this, was, nobody's seeing any problems right now. If you start to see cases, it's a good idea to put an emergency rule in, as we did. But it doesn't necessarily make any sense to keep it when, especially in this case, it was clear that it was some bad needles and a more isolated case. So I just wanted to share that information from the epidemiologist, and the fact that California is also back at a year. So it is very confusing. It became very confusing to a lot of the horsemen. I'm not saying that it's not a good idea. I mean, it'd be great if everybody had to have a Coggins every month, but I don't know if we're getting the benefit out of it under the circumstances. So that's change.
After our last meeting, I did notice when you were sending the race updates that 2 horses were scratched because of Coggins, but it looked like, but no more than 2. I was looking to see if it was going to be a huge number. I think we should go back to a year, or recommend that the commission discuss it further. Dr. Stein, Commissioner Dr. Stein.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Well, one of the problems we have in particular for Oregon is that we do not have secure barn areas. and we have horses coming in and out. We have a lot of horses, in particular quarter horses, shipping in from all over. And we have no idea what their situation is in terms of what kind of controls they have. And I went through a bunch of racetracks just to see what their requirements were. And even though, for instance, Arapahoe Park in Colorado, on their Coggins, it has to be, even though it might be a year, it has to be within 30 days of entering the barn area. So what they've actually done is and I don't know how long the race meet goes, but 30 days before you get into the barn, it has to be within that period. We have racetracks that require vaccinations. We have racetracks that are secure when a horse comes in and out. Tattoos are checked, or in this case, probably chips are checked. We don't have that. And one of the problems you have with diseases like EIA is that the testing really depends on the number of horses that are tested. And if you've got a lot of horses mixing and they're not being tested, you don't know what's going to go on. And I know that, the big problem we had was with blood doping that, infected whatever it was, 20 horses or something along those lines. But we do have cases that are not related to blood doping, that these horses contracted it somewhere, somehow. And unless you have monitoring like we have with 6 months or 1 year, 1 year, I think is personally, to me, it doesn't make sense, because you've got a horse that was tested and it could come in on a valid Coggins if you're saying a year, but it might have been tested 9 months before, 8 months before. And, when you have a case on your racetrack, it's not something you want to deal with. I'm not going to pick on Grants Pass because they have the longest meets. So of course they have to deal with a lot more manure pickup and stuff like that. Flies were pretty bad. And you get all these other insects or biting insects. So the 6 months for me makes the most sense in a situation that we have, which is a 6-month racing period. And by the way, when it was a year, at all racetracks, there were horses scratched who didn't have valid Coggins. So horsemen will always find a way to say, oh, I didn't know, or I didn't check the date on my Coggins, or something like that. It's going to happen. But the fact of the matter is there were very few scratches because they didn't have a current Coggins. And those people, the information was out there. There's really no excuse for it.
I see that Jan Palmer wants to comment, so please.
Yeah. Hi. I was the commission veterinarian at the Grants Pass fall race meet, and this is
Yes.
where I noticed the problem wasn't really with the horsemen. I disagree with Connie a bit that it was a big problem. It was a paperwork problem. These Coggins are electronically transferred all over the place, and the majority of the time was the veterinarian who had taken the Coggins hadn't transferred it to the race office, or transferred it to the client, or transferred it to the trainer, whatever, that wasn't getting transferred, either because in the majority of the cases at Grants Pass, that veterinarian didn't do electronic transfer. They relied on bringing all the paperwork over. Then the paperwork wasn't getting entered by the race office. So it really wasn't the horsemen or the trainers that were the big issue, in my opinion. It was the bog down somewhere in the paperwork. Most of them had current Coggins. It just wasn't entered, because I personally went through and checked them all before the race day. The very few exceptions where they didn't have one, they got one rather quickly.
Mhm.
So, I by week 4, And certainly by week 5, I was picking up maybe 1 or 2 horses that didn't have current coggins, even at the 6-month rule. And that's because the paperwork hadn't been entered yet. They were
Gotcha.
current, they just hadn't been entered. So, I don't think I personally care whether it's 6 months or a year. I think just make a decision, go with it, stay with it. For those horses that are racing only in Oregon and only going to the fairs in Grants Pass, they can pull their coggins in June and they'll be fine till the end of the race meet in the fall.
Yeah.
For those, but I do think the associations, the OHBPA, I can't remember all the acronyms anymore, but the quarter horse people, the thoroughbred people. I mean, I think it's incumbent upon them also when they're advertising or whatever to make a banner across their website. Remember that Oregon has a 6-month rule or a year rule or whatever it is. That's the end of my speech.
Am I remembering correctly, Dr. Palmer, that you were at our last meeting asking us to change it? Or am I thinking of someone else?
No, I was saying, no, I said you need to make a decision of what it's going to be because a lot of them were going to expire. And
it.
before the last 2 weeks of the race meet. But
Okay.
they took care of it. They got it done.
Great. Thanks.
You said you weren't
Randy?
going to change it. They were fine. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Randy?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, just obviously we've already talked about the fact that the other jurisdictions around us are at a year, and that's a feasible point. And also, just because it's an easy example, I think, and Jen probably could tell us how much this happened, but I know some of the guys were telling me that, when they did their coggins, which would have gotten them through the entire Emerald meet, they actually ran out
Mm.
and had to redo it, which is fine. If you do, you do. I mean, that's just the way the rules are. So that was that. The only other thing I would bring up is that, bearing in mind that our facility gets used by rough stock for rodeo and by the public to go in the arena and by the nice young ladies that come in and run around and do the flag thing in front of the audience, and by the little baby horses that come in, and they're all governed by the Department of Agriculture of Oregon, which is a year. So you've got two different sets of rules inside of Oregon. I'm not sure what good that does you, but
I think that's a good point. So we can make a recommendation that the commission revisit this issue. Would that be the appropriate way to say that, Director Nguyen? You're on mute.
Usually it's Micah that tells me that. I think that's appropriate. And, we may just very well stay at 6 months, which is fine with me, but I did want to bring it up because I was asked to by several people. And we're going to have a brand new commissioner on, and he may or may not have some opinions, but I'm sure over time we'll be hearing more on people's thoughts.
Great. We've had some
Commissioner-
comments.
okay.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I guess I was dealing with an old agenda. There was something, maybe it was an old agenda talking about clenbuterol. Was that deleted from?
Oh, yes. I deleted it just because we can certainly talk about it. I had thought maybe we should talk about clenbuterol because I know some places don't allow it in thoroughbreds. The information I got, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, was that clenbuterol is often used in thoroughbreds differently because they have different lengths of distance, and it may not make as much sense to eliminate it in thoroughbreds. So I took it off because no one else had really asked for it. But if you want to talk about it, we should certainly talk about it.
Yeah, Well, so I did a bunch again, going to a bunch of websites of various organizations, the quarter horses, actually Oklahoma. I was actually, my whole thing was that I don't know why the commission uh, pays for the hair testing when most other jurisdictions require the horseman to pay for the hair testing on the quarter horses. Um, that was my thing, aside from the fact that, being from the standardbred world, clenbuterol is used so often, uh, and the big controversy with possibly having to go to HISA and their rules that were like 14 days, and since standardbreds race practically every week, and then if you had a horse that you were treating with clenbuterol, you could never get the horse raced. Um, so, I mean, that's why I was hoping to talk about it. But in particular, the hair testing, that to me is it's I think it's more controversial than we realize. And I think because the quarter horses are the ones who asked this, who made the requirement. We didn't make the requirement. It was at the request, I presume, the request of the Quarter Horse Association, that we do the hair testing, and we're paying for the hair testing rather than the actual horsemen who pay for it. The actual, because, well, it's like $175 no, it's $240 at Will Rogers Downs and all the other Oklahoma tracks, 175 in Indiana. And they do it for every quarter horse. Doesn't matter whether it's a stake race or a maiden race. For them to be entered in any quarter horse race in those jurisdictions, they have to have a clean hair test, and they pay for it. So
There's a lot more money in those jurisdictions than there is here. Go ahead, Director Nguyen.
well,
Yeah. I just want to clarify that there are some races that require there be hair taken, and those are run through the Quarter Horse Association if Dave's still here, and they do pay for those tests. But if we want to do any sample testing or any testing beyond those few races, like for example, we just had a race for 75,000. A purse that big, it makes sense to do some additional hair testing, even though it's not required by the Quarter Horse Association. If Dave is on, I'm curious if he has any other information on that. Otherwise, I mean, we could just stop doing hair testing on them, but we may have to with our budget constraints for the extra ones.
Well, I think, yeah, I am still on. This is Dave Nelson, the American Quarter Horse Racing Association, also a board member of the American Quarter Horse and the racing, so on and so forth. Point was, we brought the requirement to the commission several years ago, and it was studied for 14 months, I recall. And probably the greatest defense at that time was Dr. Mike Huber, who was a member of the commission, and his concern was that it be applied both thoroughbreds and to horses. Our agreement at the time with the commission, and not that we had any authority to make an agreement, but their recommendation was that given the budget circumstances, that approximately no more, no less than about 30% or a 33%, a third of the winners, the winner of the second place, random occasionally would be tested with hair testing. The problem became with clenbuterol that it was pretty much universally used by quarter horse trainers because of its anabolic characteristics, and that you could withdraw clenbuterol from application, and the effect, the anabolic effect would still be present at 13 or 14. However, it would not test after 2 or 3 days, and so the hair test became important as a method of finding out whether or not that trainer had enhanced the performance of the horse through the use of clenbuterol. I personally used clenbuterol back in the days when it was legal. I've blown a lot of capillaries in horses with clenbuterol and lost a lot of races with clenbuterol. But used in a more judicious fashion, it's widely demonstrated that it can significantly enhance the performance of a horse by its anabolic effect on the horse. Rob Lowe and I participated in a study of quarter horses at races at Grants Pass. We paid for testing those horses and found that something close to 30% of the horses entered in the race were then using buterol to enhance the performance of their charges. So that was part of the reason why, in addition to all of the problems occurred at Los Alamitos, where they tested the top 30 horses qualified for one of the $1 million races down there, and they all were. And so it was difficult to find horses that weren't on clenbuterol. So that's why, we came to the commission several years ago and recommended strongly that they they ban use of clenbuterol in quarter horses. We exempted thoroughbreds, standardbreds, other kinds of racehorses that were complaining that they had uses for guttural pouches, things that were part of the thoroughbred training regimen. So anyway, we would strongly oppose relaxation of that requirement and would work with some fashion, whatever fashion we could, to ensure that we had a reasonable analysis hair test available. I'm done.
That's helpful input. Thank you. Does anybody else want to make a comment on this topic or any of the other topics that they didn't get a chance to say anything before? Then I think that that's the end. So I will adjourn our meeting and we'll see you guys all in an hour.
All
Thank
right,
you.
enjoy your lunch.
Thanks.